Alabama wins that game. Let's turn to the Blue Bloods, and we begin with what happened down in Gainesville tonight. Kentucky, the Wildcats coming off that statement win over Tennessee and looking like the part of a team that not only is on the right side in the bubble, but maybe could make some noise in the NCAA tournament. Kentucky 82, Florida 74. The Wildcats have won 3 in a row. Rob Dauster, how much are you willing? If I gave you $10, all right, and 10 being the most that you would put into the pot here, okay? On a scale of a buck to $10, how much would you put in the Kentucky Wildcats pot?
Excuse me. I'm pretty in on them right now. I think that not like compared to
$8, $7.
I mean, like, are we talking about winning a national title good, or are we talking about like they can get to a second weekend good? Because I'm in on them being a second weekend team. I think, look, they've won 3 straight. They're starting to get a little bit more healthy. You know, I know that they've lost some games, but CJ Frederick has been banged up. Severe Wheeler has been banged up. Cason Wallace missed a game in there. I don't think Oscar Shibwe, he still looks like someone that was dealing with a knee surgery in the offseason. I think that they are trending in the right direction. I think that they have already reached a spot where you can say they're in the right direction, right? And they've got 3 straight quad 1 wins and a sweep over Tennessee. Now, the SEC outside of Alabama is not great, John. We've talked about this before. And I think Arkansas is probably the team with the second highest ceiling in my mind, especially with Nick Smith back. I might put Kentucky 3rd. I know, is that crazy? Like, I think Alabama's a Final Four national title contender. Arkansas is like one of those teams that's going to end up being a 7th seed that everyone's going to have their trendy pick be to the Elite 8, right? I think Kentucky, I think they can climb up to like that 8, 9, 10 seed line, and they're going to give someone a hell of a fight. They're going to give a 1 seed or a 2 seed a hell of a fight in the second round of the NCAA tournament. And the thing that stood out to me tonight, Oscar Shibwe, 12 for 13 from the floor. And he wasn't like he was crashing the offensive glass, getting second chance opportunities. You know, they found a way to make it work with him. Cason Wallace didn't play great tonight, but he played well enough to get the job done. That is a team that has talent, that has pieces, that has the reigning national player of the year, that has a lottery pick, and that has a bunch of guys that are getting healthy. Like, maybe that might have been, look, it took Cal a while to figure out what his best lineup was, but once he did, then they kind of got bit by the injury bug. So I'm in on Kentucky being a threat. And, you know, I said this the other day on the DTF podcast and I got ripped for it a little bit, Fanta. I think you have to give Cal some credit for the job that he's done righting the ship, because it could have been very easy for this thing to go completely off the rails. Look at North Carolina. Look at where they are right now, right? Look at what's going on with them. They needed a last second when they ended up winning that game against Notre Dame, right? They held on to win.
They did.
So they ended up needing that win to avoid having their bubble chances completely blown up. Meanwhile, Kentucky, they've won 3 in a row. They won at Mississippi State, which is not an easy place to win. They swept Tennessee. They just won at Florida. I know Florida doesn't have Colin Castleton. Doesn't matter. That's not an easy place to win. So I think that they've kind of figured this thing out. I think you have to give Cal a little bit of credit for making sure that everyone kept pulling in that same direction.
John Calipari does deserve credit. If we're going to criticize him when Kentucky's failing, we need to credit him when he's having success. And I will give Coach Cal credit. How has Kentucky been able to figure something out? Well, you mentioned a bunch of different points that are very valid. I would submit this. To me, it's very rare in college basketball for a player who has not tallied a double-double in his first 20-some-odd games to now have back-to-back double-doubles at basically the end of February. Chris Livingston has figured something out. In his last 2 games, he's combined for 22 points and 25 rebounds. He now has scored in double figures in 4 of the last 5 games. Before this stretch of 4 out of 5 in double figures, Livingston has scored in double figures twice all season.
And you know what else it is?
Has clicked there.
I think part of it is confidence. I think part of it is getting consistent playing time. But I'll tell you what, the most important part, he's never going to be a great shooter. Right. That's probably going to be the knock on him. And that's probably going to end up being the reason that doesn't end up being a first round pick this year. But he's making enough of them right now that you gotta run him off the 3-point line. Right. And at the end of the day, when it comes to shooting, it's not necessarily the threes that you make that matter. Right. When we talk about spacing and when we talk about shooters, when we talk about all that, it is the threat of having to make a three. It is forcing a defense to respect you and come out and guard you. Right. That's what we see with a guy like Andre Jackson. Not to turn it back to UConn, but he's the easiest and the most obvious example. Teams don't guard him. That's why you lose spacing, because you could play 20 feet off of him. Chris Livingston shoots it well enough that you cannot play 20 feet off of him. And if you have Chris Livingston, Jacob Toppin, Cason Wallace, Antonio Reeves, CJ Frederick, you have four of those guys on the floor at the same time, then you're going to be able to create some space for Oscar Tshiebwe in the paint. He was 12 for 13 tonight. Finished with 25 points. It all works in conjunction. It all works together